Shalom, everybody. This is Dr. Stuart Dowerman from Interfaithfulness, where we're building bridges, where history builds walls. Today, we're continuing our series on Messianic Jewish worship, on the 7 foundations of Messianic Jewish worship. And we get these from the book of Ezra, because in the 3rd chapter of the book of Ezra, we find Israelites returning to Jerusalem to restore worship there after the first temple had been destroyed and their people had been in exile. Now Cyrus, the Persian, has given permission for them to go back and restore worship in Jerusalem. And so about 5,000 people go back to do that. And we saw last time that the foundations of this restored worship included restoring the Mizbeach, the altar. That was the very first thing they needed to do. Not build the building, but restore the altar. They needed to restore the worship of God on that site. Secondly, not only the Mizbeach, the altar, but the Machonah, the stand or the base. They re-established that altar on the very place where the altar of the first temple had stood. That's very significant. It tells us that our worship of God today needs to have continuity with the past. I know there are many Messianic synagogues where whatever liturgy we do is kind of perfunctory and kind of a necessary nod to some kind of antiquarian interest. But it's much more than that. It's really the foundation of the worship of our people, a foundation which has been precious to us for thousands of years. So the first thing we remember is the priority of worship, the Mizbeach. Secondly, to reconnect with an ancient foundation. And today we look at the third thing. The Messianic Jewish worship should include paying proper attention to the Mo'adim, the holy times and seasons. That's why I guess all of you listening to this had Shavuot services this week. And it's right that you do that, because we need to remember these holy occasions. And let me give you 3 reasons for doing that, just to reinforce your resolve. First, we need to remember what God did. At Shavuot, we remember that God gave us the Torah. That's extraordinary. He gave us the revelation of himself. Paul the Apostle says, what advantage does the Jew have? Much in every way. First, to them belongs the oracles of God. That's the very first privilege of Jewish identity. And it's not Barbra Streisand, and it's not Woody Allen. It's Torah. That's the first privilege. And so we need to remember what God did. He gave us his Torah, and he also sent forth the Spirit who abides with us now. The Spirit, the very presence of God, has drawn nearer to humanity at this time. If we will take the trouble to make ourselves vulnerable to him, we will encounter him in ways that our ancestors never did. He sent forth the Spirit through the resurrected Messiah, and we need to pause and remember what God did. Secondly, not only do we pause to remember what God did, but we need to remember to say thank you. It's not just to check it off on our calendar. We need to treat the day as special and treat God as special because of what he did. We need to pause to connect gratefully with what God did. If God had not delivered my ancestors from Egypt, I would not be here today. I would not be at all. The Jews would have been rubbed out by the Egyptians, would have been ground to the sands of Egypt as abject slaves. And don't forget it. And if God had not given the Torah to humanity, I cannot even imagine the depravity which would rule in our world. So we need to remember to say thank you. And finally, not only do we need to remember the events and what God did, not only do we need to remember to say thank you, we need to realize that our response to the symbol is equivalent to our response to the referent, to what the symbol stands for. Let me give you an example, 2 examples. In the Passover Haggadah, we read about the wicked son, who says, what are these rites and rituals? What does this mean to you? He disassociates from the people. He says, I can't be bothered with this stuff. But what does it mean to you? And the Haggadah says that if he had been alive during the Exodus, he would not have been redeemed. Because his attitude towards the symbol now is an indicator of his attitude towards the reality for which the symbol stands. Similarly, the Apostle Paul says to the Corinthians who are chowing down at the Lord's table. They're pushing other people out of the way. The rich are making the poor feel second class because the rich have plenty of food, the poor don't have enough, and it's a terrible situation. And Paul says, when you act like that, you're guilty of the body and blood of the Lord. Wow, that's big. He's saying that your attitude towards the symbol, towards the reminder, is an indicator of your attitude towards what that reminder reminds us of. You're showing contempt for the death of the Messiah when you show contempt for the ritual which reminds us of it. Similarly, we need to remember these holy occasions because our attitude towards the occasions is an indicator of our attitude towards what they stand for and also to the God who gave them to us. So I hope this is helpful to you, not only for explaining things to others, but maybe explaining things to yourself. We've got another Moed, another holy occasion coming up this Saturday. It's called Shabbat. Don't let it get past you as though it's like any other day. On Shabbat, we'll remember that God created the universe. On Shabbat, we'll remember that he made the Jewish people to be his people. On Shabbat, we should pause to remember to say thanks and to reconnect with life as God's created, redeemed people. Shabbat Shalom, way in advance, and I'll see you later here in Interfaithfulness, where we're building bridges, where history builds walls. Shalom for now.